as we talk about substance use disorder, it's really important to realize that, you have the individual in question who's struggling themselves, but it goes far beyond that, right? It's the family members. It's there's an expression that we tend to hurt the people the most who share the same last name as us. And then it obviously goes so much further, but it just ravages communities. And I would argue what's so fascinating, right, and just so devastating, and just fill in the blanks, is that addiction is an equal opportunity offender, right? Race, gender, socioeconomic status, across the board. We lose people, families devastated. And it's just something from my standpoint. I'm just so very grateful that the Senate President has given me the opportunity to be the chair of the Mental Health Substance Use Recovery Committee, because very similar to the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committee that I chair, it's really personal to me. When I go out and I talk to people on this subject matter, I'm not talking to them about a very abstract principle that I just read in a book or that I read in a newspaper. Right? These numbers are very, very near and dear to my heart. In fact, one of the things that I've said in all of my kind of speaking engagements, as we start, overdose awareness, as we start Recovery Month, which is September, is that, from last year at this time until now, four people friends, and a fifth who attended a lot of recovery meetings that I also attend, are no longer with us. So that's 5 human lives, 5 families devastated over addiction and substance use disorder. And it's truly a national tragedy. I frequently say that behavioral health, to cover mental health and substance use, is the most important issue we don't talk about enough. Because there's not going to be a single person who sees what we're talking about right now who doesn't have a family member, a very close friend. I would say family member, but I guess that, sometimes it expands out to close friends who are struggling with this, who is not struggling with this. So it's a very personal issue for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's been a national emergency, overdoses, through the ages. What's killing people now is the opioids, the fentanyl, but also maybe the shame. And how do we get through that shame part so people know, okay, there's help, there's help for you in this, and there's no shame.
I think it's really important for people to talk about it, right? I mean, the reality is that the number of people who have struggled with this thing, we have a saying in recovery: everybody from Yale to jail and everything in between. And I just think it's really helpful when people talk about it in a way, because if you talk about it, other people who might still be struggling, who might be curious about, what does recovery look like? What can I do? What are the possibilities? And let me answer you. They're endless. They're boundless. You can achieve literally anything you want. So I think talking about it. Look, when someone says, and I say this all the time, the 3 hardest words for any human being to say are also the 3 most courageous words for any human being to say: I need help. And I think it's incumbent upon people in my line of work, when people do raise their hand and they say, I need help, the system needs to be there to meet them where they are. And too often the case has been, and we have gotten so much better in this space, but for way too long, we had just horror stories where a human being was ready to take that step, and there might not have been a provider available. There might not have been a bed available. And they'll, a common occurrence would be, we don't have a bed available, but call us back in 2 weeks. Well, that person dies, right? That person goes out and dies.
Yeah.
How is that the right answer? And very simply put, it's not. It's the furthest thing in the world from the right answer. Again, we've gotten far better at that. The problem is that, many times the people who are the most able to help a loved one or a friend navigate that process don't have experience in it, right? So they might pick up the phone and call someone, and they're on hold for 2 hours. They can't get to a trusted source when they Google it because they've never dealt with it before. So meeting people where they are, right? And we've created a hotline. We've got, for all intents and purposes, and there are absolutely exceptions to this. And I know many of them right now. I talked to a mother just yesterday who was struggling with this in one of the communities that I represent. And she ultimately ended up finding a place. But there's just a dearth of knowledge on this, because one of the problems that we have is many people, and I'm absolutely going to throw, my family in this, right? It's like, you just don't know how to deal with it. Like there's no yellow pages, or there's no anything about how you deal with a loved one who is struggling with addiction. But again, I want to be positive, right? I want to continue to be a glass half full type of person, far better today than we were even 5 years ago, even far better than 10 years ago. But we've gotten a lot better. In Massachusetts, one of the benefits of being the chair of this committee is I get to go to these conferences in different parts of the country and meet colleagues of mine from different states. And do we have work to do in Massachusetts? Oh, absolutely. But far better than a lot of other states that are out there in this space. But again, there is far better when you're talking about human beings that are dying. You need to be much better, and you need to really get there's just no margin of error on this, because if a person goes back out, it could just be that batch of fentanyl that kills them. One of the most fascinating studies in this space was that the data is very clear. It tells us that most human beings will get over their addiction. Most people will outgrow it. Most people, however you want to describe that. We just don't talk about them as much, right? They've gone on, they're doing different things. They're living their life. We talk about and rightfully so, we talk about the folks where that's not the case. And that was the prevailing thought process for so long. But what has markedly changed that kind of approach is fentanyl. Just people are dying. Many recreational users who just don't even know what fentanyl is, and that's a big part of this awareness, will use and they'll die first time out, second time out, because fentanyl is an opiate. But what we're seeing right now in more overdoses, it's fentanyl, cocaine that's laced with fentanyl. All these other substances that aren't associated with opiate are now part of this. So awareness, we've done some really good things. You're going to start to see a much broader awareness campaign in Massachusetts about the prevalence of fentanyl. And it's essentially like, look, if you don't get your prescription from a CVS or a Walgreens yourself directly, or from a loved one, don't do it, because there's a very strong chance that there's fentanyl in it, and it's a counterfeit pill. Certainly the illicit stuff that's out there, my advice to anyone would be, there is fentanyl in that. Assume it's got fentanyl. Talking to some of my buddies in law enforcement, what they'll tell you is we really don't see heroin anymore. It's all fentanyl driven. So it's just a really dangerous time. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, said something that I thought was fascinating the other day. Fascinating in the worst type of way, is that the drug supply right now is more contaminated than it has ever been in our nation's history. So it's just dangerous out there. But stigma, treatment beds, prevention, right? Prevention. I'm such a big proponent of prevention in so many areas, right? We have a tendency in America and in Massachusetts is we deal with a problem after it's formed. Well, let's get in there and give young kids a better way to go about it. Look, I hate saying this. I go to all of the graduations. I love them. Many communities in my district still do it dare, right? But scaring kids into not using drugs, there's no empirical evidence that that works. There's no empirical evidence. I mean, that's just there's going to be people who watch this who are going to get mad at me. Sorry, I'm just reading the data that's out there. So we need to do prevention things that are beyond just dare. We need to talk about it. We need to, if you see a buddy struggling, you need to talk to them, talk to their family. We need to educate parents. We need to educate schools. People who have the most close contact with young kids need to know how dangerous is out there. We're hearing horror stories about these pressed pills. You know, a kid goes online, Instagram, TikTok, you can buy any drug in the world that you want, thinking that it's substance A, and in actuality, it's a counterfeit fentanyl pill. We need to get this message out there. So this is something that I'm really passionate about. And obviously, Overdose Awareness Day on the 31st. I mean, it's like, look, there are a lot of people, the way we honor those who have died, who have overdosed and who are no longer with us, I would say, is that we go out there and we just try to prevent more and more of their friends, their family members from doing the same. I think that's how we honor them, and we say their name, we talk about them. We don't treat them as anything. We treat them with dignity. We treat them with honor, right? You're struggling. It's something that's very human. Just get the help that you need. But we got a lot of work to do still.